Hello, everybody, and welcome to General Conversations. I'm your host and general conversationalist, Evan Fusco. And today I am here with Grace Papineau-Couture.
Got it right.
Hell yeah. Grace Papineau-Couture is a Canadian interdisciplinary artist working with low-tech and found objects as instruments and sculptures. They are interested in sound as a generative process, something unfolding, recursive, and responsive, allowing for sound and listener to have a dialectical relationship. Her sound practice, which spans performance, experimental music, graphic scores, and installation, also includes making experimental instruments, exalting their objecthood, and embracing how they change physically and sonically in response to play, interaction, and time. Using old and low-fidelity technology such as cassette tapes, contact microphones, and salvaged speakers in performances, sound installations, and experimental music pieces is vital to the instrument's construction. Grace uses these outmoded formats of technology to explore themes of haunting and ask, what do we hear in the latency? What kind of apparition reveals itself to us through the cracks of low fidelity? Grace?
Perfect, that's me.
That was absolutely not perfect, but that's how it goes. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, that artist name is kind of a lot. It's very long,
Yeah.
but that's neither here nor there. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. It's the bio artist statement kind of combination.
Yeah.
And I think, this week's answer to the question will be interesting because I'm interested how you think about it in relation to sound. But, the main conceit of the show is conversation. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
On conversation?
On just conversation, yeah.
I mean, conversation is sound, which is kind of like a dumb answer to that.
Yeah.
But it fits with the responsiveness of what I'm working with when I think of my sound practice myself. I think of it also as a conversation that I'm having with these materials that are kind of quite fragile and kind of delicate. And they are responding to me in kind the same way that somebody else would respond to me through conversation as well. But I think conversation's great. Some people are bad conversationalists also.
Yeah.
It's the same way that somebody can be like a bad improvisationalist in music as well.
Absolutely.
And I used to be terrible to talk to.
Yeah.
I used to be so bad to hold a conversation with. And I was also, conversely, bad at improvising. And
which is a lot of your practice.
Yes, yeah. And then, I don't know, one day I guess I just kind of, I moved countries, and I was like, I have to figure out how to talk to people that don't know me.
Yeah.
Then I really started improvising music, and I was kind of like, oh, you have to like really, half of a conversation is listening to somebody also, the same way as it is sound. It's actually more so listening than it is talking.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's funny how these kinds of things come up in these really interesting ways. Like improv and listening are just such important parts of the conversation. And like talking with Jesse last week, the kind of conversation versus interview format.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in that kind of way, I wonder, this is a terrible transition,
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about improv and thinking of conversation as sound, right? And conversation being a kind of back and forth of sound and the listening to the sound.
Mm-hmm.
One thing you had mentioned in our email kind of getting ready for this was this idea of the dialectical relationship to sound.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you could kind of talk to that a little bit. Like, is this like Hegelian like relationship to sound, or like are we talking something like maybe further back than that?
I think maybe further back to some extent. Like, it's because it's a material relationship to sound. So when you think about it also like in terms of your like your soundscape environment that you live in, you are shaped by it as much as you shape it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the sort of like dialectical relationship to sound that I'm talking about, where it's like especially when I'm playing with these instruments, like I am shaped by the sound that they are making, and my next move is sort of like predicated on the sound that is emitted from these instruments that I'm using, and it's a little bit unpredictable. So like when I create like a set in my live performance practice, I have sort of like what I call like a run of show, and it's based off of action versus note, because there's no way to predict the tone that I'm going to be able to pull out of this thing. It's just an act of like doing, and then based off of, you know, the tone that is emitted from, you know, the action that I've done, I can then kind of like transmute my next move into, you know, what I can kind of predict will sound good.
Yeah.
But yeah, especially like in soundscape, like if you were to remove yourself from your environment, the sound of your environment would be completely different. Mm-hmm. When I'm not home, my home doesn't sound the same.
Yeah.
You know? But we have, and so this is a sort of like reciprocal relationship that we have sonically to everything. You're constantly always shaping something sonically.
Yeah. So this kind of, more of like a kind of Marxist.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And, you know, I think of like, in that the kind of right, and thinking about the ways that our bodies and ourselves as material relate to that kind of materiality of sound, like that kind of sense almost of like the body's resonances, and that being this really important kind of thing, like the way that sound responds to the body, right?
Yeah.
And like that kind of back and forth that happens is definitely...
Yeah. I mean, there's like... It's very much mediated through your presence in the room. Like if you think of other like sound installations like Dream House, like by Lamont Young, like it only sounds the same if you're standing in one spot. Yeah. But when you move through, you know, this house with these 32 tones, then it starts to kind of shift and change. And that is like an interesting instance, the most famous instance of sound being mediated through the body and your relationship to the environment. And it's this sort of like give and take where it's like it's changing, but you're also changing place throughout this house as well.
Yeah. I wonder then what you think of, it seems like more and more I'm seeing the, instead of the headphones for the ears, the headphones that go through your bone.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this?
I think these are super interesting. I've never tried them, but I'm very interested because I was reading earlier today about like clubs in New York and how they were like increasingly concerned with higher and higher fidelity for these sort of dance parties. But I'm wondering if we can actually hear that well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, does it actually fucking matter if you need like the most crisp fidelity? Because it doesn't leave any room for anything to be desired. Like, you can't hear anything else in your head going on. It's just this sort of like, it's almost too perfect in my mind. This like sound that is going through your bone. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of me that wish, this is where I'm kind of jealous of those late night hosts where it's like, I could be like, and here, we're going to test out.
Yeah, and here,
we're going to do this whole interview.
This, yeah.
All of the headphones that we're using are just, it's going through our bones.
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder then, this kind of, right, there's almost something kind of funny about a sound artist being like, why are you trying to make this all sound so good? But that's like a kind of, it seems like an almost like ethical point of view when it comes to the sound in relation to like sound and desire. And I wonder if you want to talk about that a little bit more.
It is for me an ethical like relationship to like fidelity. I think fidelity is, I don't know, inaccessible a little bit to some degree. I don't think we should be worrying about it too much.
Yeah.
When they were building cinemas, film was actually like the highest fidelity that you could get.
Mm-hmm.
But the environment that they would design the actual cinema for to look like, you know, old European, like opulent, you know, houses of entertainment. I don't know why I said it like that, but it doesn't matter. In the US, you wouldn't actually, they would place these speakers behind the screens, you wouldn't actually get the fidelity of the movie from where you were sitting back in this theater. So it's just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of ironic in some way, but it just seems, and I don't know. And then these like engineering houses that you know they would build in Germany with like government funding, and they're kind of like inaccessible to some degree. And you find other ways around that. Like people didn't really care that the movie sounded like shit. They were just happy to go to the movies.
Yeah.
And they didn't really care to get into like the producer house in Germany. They just wanted the music given to them in whatever format it was given to them in. It doesn't really matter at a certain point, I think. And also, like, just from a personal standpoint, I don't have access to incredible high fidelity equipment because I'm like broke as shit, and I got most of my stuff for free. But it's not what you're using; it's how you use it, also. And I think that's way more important to be, you know, just making something and allowing people to kind of hear what they're going to hear between those cracks. In terms of like hear what they're going to be able to hear between those cracks of sound and kind of allow some sort of like chance to happen. Like chance encounter with sound, I think, is more exciting than just being given a sound that you're going to hear and that's it.
Yeah, that, like what just happened, because I was like, do I have the right?
You adjusted the levels and I was like, I can't think anymore.
My I think my headphones are just being weird. Again, I'm like, why isn't the fidelity? But no, it's this kind of really, what's the way to put it? It's like I'm thinking of film versus theater, and this kind of, right, how sometimes in the theatrical production, right, in many ways, right, the fidelity kind of its like realness is in our minds now so much less.
Yeah.
But yet, sometimes the absorption you have in like a theatrical space is so much greater than in like a really well-made film, like with the most amazing CGI and everything looks real, but it's boring.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, this kind of, it's almost like a kind of real versus unreal, or like, it's like the fidelity, to have a higher fidelity, you lose all of the joyful happenstances of like, right, the moment where all of a sudden bass blows out in a club and you're just like, you feel it so much differently than when it's like all perfect.
Yeah. Or in a movie, they've started doing this thing where they like mix the like sound effects way higher than they do the voices, which I find terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you're like watching it at home, and it's specifically meant to be viewed in a theater is the only way that that's going to make sense, but then they don't fix it for home viewing. So everybody's lower fidelity speakers fucks up the viewing experience like beyond recognition, because you have to like turn it up during dialogue and turn it way the fuck down if there's like an explosion that's going on.
Yeah. No, I remember, and this was many years ago, so it's a different thing, but I remember, I think it was like a Lions work, because I loved Lion King growing up, and we had gotten Lion King 2, and we were going to watch it, but my dad had these like super wild, intense surround sound speakers, and so when it was so loud with like that lion roar or something like that, I got so scared, I was like, I refused to watch it. But it seems like, there's this almost like a priority of visuals over sound.
Yes.
Right? It's almost like, and, you know, I remember something that I was always sensitive to was not being able to understand like what somebody was singing on a song because of that exact same kind of production.
Yeah.
It's like a kind of like Phil Spector kind of production where it's like everything else is just it's just so bombastic that it's like you lose all of these smaller elements.
Yeah, you lose the smaller elements that are kind of like more curious than, you know, the big production of it all. I also have a problem with when they remaster old movies.
Yeah.
That looks like shit. It looks so fucking bad. If you watch a movie, like I can't remember when it was, but like the last time I watched one of my favorite movies, The Mummy, they have this like trap door that opens and she like falls down the trap door, and it looks like fucking shit. But if it were lower fidelity, you wouldn't realize that it looks that bad.
Yeah.
But they've gone through and artificially remastered it, and you like us as a viewer, we don't actually need that. The original production was like totally fine. Our eyes are not fine-tuned. Our TVs like don't actually work like that. You know what I mean? Like it also like it leaves room, like visually in film, not remastering a film leaves room for like to suspend your disbelief a little bit as well. Where you're not like, oh, that was a set piece and it looked like garbage then, probably in person. It looks like garbage again on screen after they've remastered it.
Yeah.
But it goes through this sort of like channel of process and then reprocessing as it gets to your TV, and whatever resolution that's at, and it just looks fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we don't need it.
Yeah. Was it Buffy the Vampire Slayer where they like remastered it for like streaming?
Yes.
And they ended up including more of the like full film stock than they did originally because it got formatted for TV. And there ended up being, or maybe it wasn't Buffy, it was something, or no, it was the, or it was in The Mandalorian maybe. It was like, there was like the blue jeans guy.
Yeah.
But I think something else happened. But it's like that when, you know, it's the same thing I think of with like how pixel art became this big thing because people are like playing video games on nicer consoles and like simulators and things like that aren't the same resolution as these original games. So where in the original games it all fuzzes out into this beautiful outline.
Yeah.
Now you're seeing the pixels and people started to kind of like, it becomes an anachronism.
Yes, it becomes an anachronism and you think you're actually playing the wrong game or viewing the wrong shit. Like they fucking did this with Seinfeld also. Like they like remastered for streaming and it's now like in the widescreen. You actually, for like a network comedy like that, the like regular format that they put it out in was fine. You don't need that much information on the screen. It's actually better if you don't have it.
Nobody needs to see George Costanza in high definition.
No. We really don't need Jerry Seinfeld in high definition.
Well, that I thought went without saying.
Yeah.
Because I think there's going to be at least one person who listens to this and goes, I don't need George Costanza in high definition.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Well, you know, so kind of talking about this kind of question of fidelity, right? These are very production-based ways of like engaging with sound, right? And we're talking like these big productions, but that's not really where you live or work necessarily, right? And I'm wondering if you could kind of talk about like what kinds of, in your practice, like what is the sound that you're kind of attracted to? Like what kind of, like what is, for those who have no idea and are just meeting you for the first time, it's like what does your sound often consist of and sound like?
My sound, I've started to describe it as a little bit percussive lately. It's electroacoustic when I'm, you know, playing live and recording and doing whatever. And like these instruments that I create are made from like found objects that I either like, you know, sound objects that I, you know, put a mic to or contact mic or something like that. Or I'll create them out of like found wood and just like put guitar strings on them, you know, fuck with the tension and like, you know, different sort of like densities of wood. If you bow it or tap on it or whatever, it's going to have this sort of different resonance to it. and like amplifying that with a contact microphone. But when I'm actually creating a composition with these sort of like atonal sounds that are produced, or these percussive sounds that are produced, I'm kind of, I like to invoke a feeling of ritual within this sort of like drone. And I use drone as a more expansive term than some other people. Like I'm not like, I don't have anything against, you know, Euro racks or like no input mixing or anything like that. It's fine. It's just not for me. Mm-hmm. And I feel like people get hung up on that being drone and ambient. Ambient is this sort of like one sustained tone that kind of like floats dreamily into this next tone, and you're worried about, you know, creating something that's at like a 440 hertz or whatever. And I feel like that is such a reductive instance of what drone is. Drone is like, when you go back to the history of it, it's a ritual experience that evokes something in you that is sort of like this sort of greater understanding of, you know, your material reality around you. So we first experience as humans reverberation, people would just chant in caves all fucking day, because it was this like transcendent experience that you could feel in your core and kind of felt larger than you. And that's kind of what I want to get at when I am, you know, doing my compositions.
Yeah, there was I think it was Taylor Moore who does the sound design and like instrumentation and things like that with other people for Worlds Beyond Number, this like D&D podcast. And he's was talking about he was like, so I'm gonna play these like notes on the piano, and it's like they don't quite work, and then he's like, this is what happens when I put it in the human voice. And it's just so much better.
Yeah,
it's like the things that are pleasant coming from the human voice are just so much greater than the things that are pleasant coming from these instruments. But it also kind of sounds in some ways like you're talking about this, right? I can't help but think about drone in relation to the human voice because of you bringing up the chanting, but then almost thinking about like, in some ways it seems like the objects that you're using, like with the contact mic and things like that, is like it's kind of their voice that is coming through. Yeah,
definitely, because you know, it's not like I'm, you know, miking it up with a mic that we're using right now to speak into, because that's not going to work. It's not. Yeah. It's just there's no way to catch the resonance of a stick being bowed.
Or rocks just aren't loud enough.
Rocks just aren't loud enough. Yeah. And it's not going to catch the same sort of atmosphere that is being able to be created through, you know, the way that I do my instrumentation. But it is this sort of like, it's this voice, and it's like affected by the, you know, the way that I actually play this instrument, and like how light or how soft or what I'm doing to it. And it's like, its voice does sort of like come out, and it's the beauty of the contact mic also. It picks up, you know, the beautiful reverberations that happen, but it is also not a high fidelity microphone, so it kind of like clips and fuzzes and modulates whatever's coming out of there to another extent as well, and then whatever shitty house DIY speakers I'm playing through.
Yeah. 100%. Well, there is, right, and it kind of keeps coming back to this question of like the low fidelity. And I'm wondering, you know, if you could talk a little bit more, because something I often encounter with drone or noise or ambient or any of these kinds of things, especially in the context of live shows, there's a feeling that comes of the person performing has no social or physical awareness of anybody else around them in a way that is, I think, conducive to what you're talking about with ritual, but oftentimes just turns into this person has no idea that none of these people were ready, and they don't know that they're blowing out the speakers, and they don't know that they're kind of being antagonistic.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, resonance.
Resonance.
For those who can't see, Grace just hit their knee on the table. But it's that, I'm thinking about what you're talking about in this kind of like the drone as something ritual, and I'm wondering if you have thoughts on this kind of, right, a certain, like, in kind of being the conductor of the ritual, like what your responsibility is kind of to the people listening and who are participating in some ways through listening.
Yeah, this is interesting because I've performed in music, I would say, in, I don't know, since I was like 16 or something. Back when I played an actual instrument called the guitar.
What?
Yes.
Wild.
And like that, I still approached it with the same thing, where I wanted to be like a conductor of this sort of like, or facilitator of this sort of like ritual that people would have, because I was still using, a lot of the same ideas, like looping and this sort of like haunting melodies and lots of layers and things like that. And when I started to expand out of that, I wanted to take that skill that I had started to hone of live performance and apply it to these, like, I wouldn't say that my music is noise music, but that's where I kind of fit best in like a DIY scene. It's fine. I don't mind it. But I wouldn't say that that's not what I would call my music.
Yeah.
But like, I do want to take that sort of like commanding the audience to, participate in some way versus like, and I'm not slandering any of these other noise musicians that do what they do. It's just different than what I do. Because they do have this sort of like, hey, I'm making noise and you're being subjected to it, which isn't, like it has a place in music history. Goes all the way back to, pre-Velvet Underground type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, futurist like music. And like noise and the trash noise. And
and I don't want to, like, my goal isn't to subject anybody to anything. My goal is to like invite people into this sort of like expanded listening experience where there is like it's sort of more akin to classical music is what I would say, because I try and have these like movements throughout my piece that are telling the story through audio, versus like, we're gonna just listen to noise and you're going to be subjected to the sound that you're going to be subjected to, and the speakers are blowing out and I'm kind of on stage by myself and you're also in the room. I approach it as more of like, we're all in a room together and I'm playing alongside the instruments that I am playing and I'm responding to them, but we're also all responding at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and of course, if we're thinking about resonance, right, the kind of, by virtue of being in that room, if we kind of follow the logic we were talking about earlier, everybody is in some ways affecting the way that piece is being performed.
Yes. It's interesting, like, how it feels to play a piece to a room of 6 people versus a room of like 30 people. Mm-hmm. I'm using small numbers because I play noise shows. And like 6 people is much quieter, and you sort of like natural instinct is to sort of like, let's lower the volume and have everybody get a little bit closer. 30 people you kind of feel we're above praying one day. I've played to more, but not this. But anyways, you kind of have the instinct to be like, okay, it's more of a spectacle. You're all gonna stay where you're gonna stay and watch. But you have less of that inclination to be like, okay, everybody gather around and like participate in a more intimate way with me versus like, I'm going to do my best to like leave everybody, in the room and have them still feel like it is an intimate experience, even though there's more people here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, there's Glenn Gould, who I mostly know through Edward Said writing about Glenn Gould. But he is somebody who like kind of in this kind of classical piano, like he like reinvented how we played and listened to and understood like Bach, or not reinvented, but like reinvigorated it, right? And he is somebody who, for him, that kind of the way that the audience affected the way that he played. And he's playing to thousands upon thousands of people at once, and he's like in the concert halls, and he's like, even that, just by virtue of them being there, I am playing my piano differently. And so he ends up fully giving up this stage and goes and like just does only like piano recordings.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, I'm just thinking of that and what you're talking, like, you know, maybe one day thousands of people, but like, yeah, like just like the ways that this kind of idea that sound is like a social phenomena regardless, like no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, and I played a show at Elastic Arts last week, and it's also kind of funny because I like to consider my audience a little bit, and I'll choose certain compositions for certain audiences. So prior to, I had played a show at a DIY venue that was sort of this, like, I don't know, it was a little bit more like percussive and industrial and like harsher, but not like too noisy or anything like that. Still. But like a little more weird. And so which is fine because it's like a DIY venue and everybody there's like me unemployed, but you know.
If you are, what Grace is saying is if you are unemployed, you are more prone to being okay with really noisy shit.
Yes. And then I played the show at Elastic Arts, and it's like a vastly different crowd. And so I'm going to, you know, I want to have a good show, and I want to, you know, kind of invite my audience to like understand what I'm doing and not alienate them, which I think is, and so I play a different set, which I think is totally fine, and I love everything that I do, obviously, or else I wouldn't be doing it. But I think that is also kind of like going back to what you were saying earlier, like a fault of noise, that it can be very alienating in its like attempt to find, you know, this sort of like outsider crowd.
Yeah.
And that's fine, it has its place, but I kind of am like, I find sometimes it gets into the territory of like being alienating just for the sake of being alienating, which I don't think serves a purpose.
Yeah. Well, and also, right, it's like that, the futurist kind of noise music that I was pointing towards, right? It's like they end up veering into fascism.
Yes.
And it's like there is something that I wonder always about in that kind of historical framework of like this thing which can be both so kind of freeing and like open and full of possibility. You know, I've ventured into that before, but it still has that kind of flip side of like also the people who were into this, because right, it came from so much of this kind of historical moment of the sounds of the city and like denying the natural and like this kind of fascist aesthetics that it just kind of it just flew into that. You know, and I think in so many ways it's this way that noise or drone, right, because again, noise being this kind of reductive sense, but like this idea of drone and ritual that you get into is kind of that alternate history that goes against that.
Yes.
And we didn't quite hit on it, but you also talk about drone as a kind of folk music. Like we kind of pointed towards it.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up right now, actually.
Well, because I was going to say, it's like, for me, a kind of folk relationship to the people around you, to these kinds of histories, to the land, is so against that kind of fascist ideology.
Yeah, and it's against it, like, as a point, too, because there are, you know, multiple different ways of knowing or ways of seeing. But I think, so when we started with music notation, because music turned out there was a need for it to become bought and sold. Prior to, it was all oral and aural history. And that was allowed and accepted to change as it went down the line. In fact, expected that it was going to not be the same story every single time because it was being mediated through a bunch of other different factors through whoever was telling it. But I find drone to be like sort of like a sonic folk music, because there's no possible way for you to notate it or own it. There's only this sort of understanding how you are going to experience drone or how you are going to communicate drone. And I find that to be very beautiful. And the fact that it's just like there's no possible way that you can own a sustained note. Like it just is. There's no way it can become a commodity. I mean, if somebody can find a way, they could do it, but they're not. I don't think it's a very.
I wonder what the copyright laws around that are. It's like, could you copyright a sustained note and profit? But I don't think
there's no way.
No. Well, where there's a will.
Yeah, where there's a will, there's a way. But
no, but I think that it makes sense in that kind of, we were talking about that kind of Marxist idea of like the dialectical materialism of sound, and it becomes this interesting way that like, I mean, even sound in like the kind of musical and even within musical notation, right? It's like even within it still sits a kind of resistance to that desire for ownership.
Yeah.
And that kind of, the ways that folk music generally was, like so spread out, but also even when it started to get recorded by like, the field recordings and these kinds of things in the early 20th century, like even still, it just kind of kept flowing. And it's like, even the ways that you can see people kind of trying to put an ownership onto like these histories of music where it's like, oh, well, this person is like the grandmother and this person is the grandfather, and like this kind of reinstatement of this kind of like familial ownership language.
Yeah.
I would never take that away from the people who like really were doing the work, but it's also funny that it's like that didn't change anything about their material realities, that they were like, what was it, Loretta Thorpe, right?
Yeah.
Who's like the grandmother. I might be getting that name wrong and I am very sorry. We're not looking it up.
No.
But that kind of, it didn't necessarily change her material reality.
Yeah.
Right? And she would probably argue, well, yeah, me, but also look at all of these people around me also doing this stuff.
It's the same thing of like, grandfathers of heavy metal, Black Sabbath. I don't think they would say, oh, I did not look anywhere for inspiration. It just sort of like dawned on me like the word of God, and Tony Iommi was like, I just started playing fucking riffs. I've listened to no music before then. Like, there's no way that that's going to happen.
I mean, it's like you listen, and even just to keep it within that kind of mainstream, I mean, you listen to the first Bob Dylan, like the record where he's covering people and he's writing some of his own songs, right? He does Song for Woody. And it's like, not only is he kind of pointing and he's like, look at all of these people I'm following through, but it's like, you can hear in that first album this kind of rough and almost like yelling that itself comes from like blues and everything that leads us to anything where it's like, oh, well, let's just push that.
Yeah.
It's like, there's always this just kind of flow.
Yeah.
Like almost like the history of music is just a sustained note with variation.
Yes. And that is itself a drone that doesn't stop flowing, and it's just forever in time. There's no such thing as like, and I don't say this in a bad way, like there is such thing as originality, of course, but like you didn't invent anything at this point in time. And I think it's nice actually when I see somebody who does something similar to what I'm doing, it makes you feel like you're not like stupid in a way where it's like, oh, I'm part of like a fabric of something, and I fit in here, and I'm not, alone in the world with these ideas that don't make any sense and nobody understands.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, music there's a whole form of like, or a whole term for when you pull something from somebody else's music, interpolation.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like that, and it's like, there's nothing more exciting for me, at least, is to find the not original, and like to see what happens when a new person takes the song and does something else with it.
Yes, just like Brain Stew by Green Day is Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You by Led Zeppelin.
I never really listened to Led Zeppelin, which is like very funny to me. But
take my word for it.
I trust you.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's so many songs like that.
I know, yeah.
It's, you know, I mean, we're kind of seeing now, I think there's more of a, like, in the last, like, what, like, with the, like, rise of major labels really intensely, you start to see, like, oh, we're going to sue this person because it sounds like this. Or
yeah,
like,
and then half the time that doesn't really win because there's, especially when you're thinking of, like, you know, Western scales of music, there's really only so much you can do. And, you know, if your expression is different enough, copyright law says that, you know, whoever is getting sued is probably going to win.
Yeah. Well, and also, too, it's like, once you've listened to enough music, like, the consistency with which I'll hear a song I haven't heard before, but it sounds like something else, and I'll just turn to my friend and start singing the other song over the song we're listening to, especially when it is bands coming up. I'm like, they're just, that band, they're just playing I Can't Get No Satisfaction, but it's a different song, you know?
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Truly. But I think, you know, that's what's so, I think, I mean, amazing, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I just remembered Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska, and it just popped into my mind. Thinking about low fidelity from earlier, but I don't know where that actually falls into anything. Where are we at on time? Okay. We're getting closer and closer to the end, so I kind of want to pivot us a little bit, because this kind of has to do with some of your more like kind of sculptural sound work and something we did together for General Things Press, which was scores for weaving. And I'm wondering, like, I wanted to hear from you and talk a little bit about this relationship between sound and weaving, and this kind of, I always think, I mean, weaving's kind of metaphor of the warp and the weft just permeates truly, it feels like everything all of the time.
Absolutely everything.
But I wonder if you could talk about it a little bit with sound and how you kind of approach it.
So I have, it's this like giant branch that I have like strung this sort of makeshift loom on. And, you know, this performance is completed or like started, and I, you know, do like a pass through the weave and then pass it back through after the performance ends. But the beauty of this conceptually is you can kind of like leave it open. It's sort of like, it's still, this performance is still ongoing for, you know, however long amount of time it's going to go for.
Could we actually back up a little bit and kind of, just because in case somebody hasn't seen it or isn't sure what you're talking about, like, what is this kind of, like, what was the start of this performance and like as an object?
The start of this was, I was gifted a 6-foot tree branch. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, I am kind of interested in weaving. It's like a really old technology. And if I'm thinking about old technology, you know, weaving is one of them. There's this like nice possibility of like transforming this into sort of like a, you know, ritual looking object also. And I find the act of weaving to be very, you know, ritualistic in some way, where it's just a lot of repetition. It's a lot of passing back through, passing over things, and creating this sort of like pattern story through some way, through like changing threads or actually creating, you know, designs that tell the story. And so I started this like very long, I guess you call it ongoing performance, where I just slowly complete like a woven piece on this tree branch loom that is related to each performance that I do. So every time I do a live performance, you know, pass through on the loom. And I've performed with it at Hyde Park also. You know, you put a contact mic on it and you can get the sound of the weaving, amplified, loop it, sounds beautiful. But I find this relationship to be like a meditative one almost. because you never really have to finish it. Like there's no timeline to complete this weaving. It's open-ended, and it can be, put down and picked up anytime you sort of feel the need for this like ritual, I guess. But the relationship to weaving is like, there's like a visual relationship to what's happening sonically, where these sounds and these loops are kind of like passing through each other and passing over each other and repeating, and like I'm mixing in different things and different textures, and it's sort of this like other visual relationship, or visual representation of kind of like, weaving together all of these sort of like disparate tones to create an actual composition.
Yeah, this kind of, right, if musical notation is in some ways this attempt at commodifying sound to find different ways of understanding musical notation and all of these other different forms of visuality seems like the kind of answer to like break out so that it becomes just one of many. And how do we kind of, and I'm thinking of like all of the different scores that come out, especially like mid-century, that are like fully breaking down that musical notation space. And like there are also some like hilarious ones where it's like I can't think of any off the top of my head, but like just the parentheticals that come in the like musical notation, and it's just like, what did you just say to me?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
What am I doing with that chicken? Like, where did that chicken come from?
Yeah, or like scores where it's just like a picture of like a plane crash or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, like, for you with those scores for weaving, was it kind of an extension of that branch loom project? Or?
Yeah, it was an extension of this project where I was like, I was trying to think of ways to like transform this visual relationship into other visual relationships that were other forms of ritual. So taking this sort of like ritual object that I had created, which was like this natural and old technology, I was like, well, how many other ways can I represent this to like this sort of like idea of the natural world and technology? So I got two like metaphysical books about like astrology and just like pulling images from there, and also scientific texts on fractals in plants and things like that, and just scanning it 1 billion times through a Xerox machine, because I also enjoy when things go through too many processes. So it just kind of like by process just becomes something completely else.
Yeah.
And so just like scanning this about 1 billion times, and it's like, what can I transform this into? And also like the repetitive act of scanning things over and over again. I was like going through a big repetition phase. Yeah. But the signs and symbols, because there is like a symbol key that you can follow. Signs and symbols are kind of pulled from like physical action of what you might do, like the physical act of bowing and how that might look on a page, and then taken from like astrological things, which is just grabbing at like folk knowledge, and symbols from like folk understanding and alchemy and things like that, because those are all like folk science. I mean, you'd call it pseudoscience also, but folk.
Yeah, well, I promise my transitions will never get any better as long as I do this. Speaking of astrology and alchemy and these very hot button kind of controversial things to believe in sometimes, or not. I mean, everybody loves astrology now, but we're kind of getting towards the end. So my question for you is, what is your hot take about, like, kind of just fully just bring it into silly realm, like what is your hot take about the art world, and or maybe the kind of music world or the soundscape world?
I gotta figure out what I want to be like on camera and on radio, because I have too many hot takes. But first of all, I want to point out that I don't believe in alchemy.
Yeah.
And actually, this does bring me to my point. I think that And I don't believe in astrology also. I use this as sort of like an aesthetic and like, folk way of approaching like how people mystify their own life and kind of thing. And like, the ritual of like acting and searching for something that you kind of can't grasp in the face of, material conditions and things like this. I think that too many people are starting to believe in tarot in their art practice. I think that's getting to like a little bit of too metaphysical realm, in my opinion. I think you should put that down.
You are never going to be allowed back into school right in Chicago.
I know.
But I think, I agree. And I wonder, right, there's this, I think with things like tarot and astrology and alchemy, we're so stuck in this world of you either believe in something or you don't believe in something, instead of seeing, right, these ancient practices and the kinds of, right, talk about kind of randomization, kind of gamification in many ways of, right, understanding internal, right, tarot can work only because we are meaning-making animals.
Yes.
And, like, it's, I think you kind of said it in a different way, but it's like this idea that it's like to utilize these things which make meaning, but you don't have to believe, like, we treat it as if it's something to believe in, like a religion.
Yeah.
And they're not.
It's not. I'm interested in astrology and alchemy in the same way that I'm interested in like medieval medicine practices. You know what I mean?
No.
Like leeches and bloodletting. They've thought that was going to do something also. And it didn't, but it's very interesting to learn about the history of how people understood like dirt and cleanliness and medicine back then. So in the same way as they understood like, oh, Venus is here in the sky and I can see it, and therefore something's going to happen to me with my love life or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and it's, there's so many ways in which what we learned from those things and the amount of ancient practices there are that really did get it right in just like a completely different way, right?
Yeah.
Just for example, right, the bark that we get, what is it, ibuprofen or like that kind of being something to chew to relieve pain.
Yeah.
It's like, these kinds of ancient, it's like, where does the knowledge come from and how do we not just, right, it's like so much of it's just been turned into like a commodification of these things.
Yeah.
Right, it's like, how much money can CoStar make off of really bad?
Yeah. But yeah, and my last hot take, okay, this is advice. In your printmaking, do not make the tarot card thing again. Unless you are looking to sell it, that shouldn't go up on the wall in a critique.
Damn.
Sell tarot cards all you want. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. Well, and it's always funny. Tarot, once people start doing tarot in art school, they all of a sudden realize how much work goes into producing those things. Yeah. And they're like, oh, I can't get this done for that.
Yeah.
All right, we are against tarot here on the conversation. No, I have a beautiful tarot deck that I was gifted that is like all of the philosophers.
I also have a beautiful tarot deck from my aunt that I was gifted because, you have
to be gifted.
You have to be gifted one.
That's a superstition I can get behind.
Actually, in Serbia, you should not be gifted a tarot card. That is bad luck. You need to buy a fresh one yourself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of got into it a little bit, but in a more kind of on a more serious, less kind of spicy note, like, is there advice you would give to art students currently that are kind of going through the motions of art school?
Yes. Harkening back to my days, if you hit a wall in your work and you have the worst critique of your life, just keep putting in your 15 minutes and that will stop happening to you. Mm-hmm. Truly, if you put in your 15 minutes a day, like that is my best advice. This is the stupidest like dad advice. It's so simple, but it actually works. I sit down and I put in my 15 minutes at my, sound art desk in, the studio area of my house. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm actually good at what I do.
Yeah.
And it's a very good feeling to feel yourself exponentially grow, but you should put in your 15 minutes.
Yeah. And, it's the daily practice, because, like, they all have it's like they're supposed to do, like, 4 hours outside of studio and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it's like, so they should be doing it, but it's that everyday consistency, and even in the small
Well, because
ways.
sometimes, your 4 hours is a lot. That's a big chunk of time. It's really daunting. So chunk it out into smaller, more manageable bites, and you're going to have a more fulfilling time, and you might hit a flow state, and you might hit that 4 hours just because you started your 15 minutes.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time. Grace, Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. This has been General Conversations. We're on every Thursday, 6 p.m. Reach out general.conversations.sic@gmail.com if you want to be a guest. See you all next week. Thanks.